Welcome to Deal Town. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so you are with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Homesale Realty. Do I have that right?
That's correct. Yes,
all right,
sir.
All right.
Yep,
so,
got it right.
Just to clarify, Homesale Realty is a division of, a franchise? How do you describe it?
Franchise, yeah.
Franchise, okay.
It's a franchise of the Berkshire global brand of real estate services.
Right on.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
So I was trying to describe to somebody internally in my company what it is you do, and the best way I could describe it is that, so first of all, you manage around 35 offices, right?
Yep.
All residential real estate offices. But
yep.
in many ways, your job is similar to or the same as, say, a director of real estate for a Burger King franchisee. You know, that
That's
guy
correct.
has got 35 locations to manage and leases, and he's got to go off and find new sites, and you do the same thing, but for residential real estate.
Yeah, I actually am the realtor for realtor offices.
Yeah,
right? So I go out and look for the best locations and look for the best, price per square foot that I can get us,
Sure.
and the best packages overall, so that all of our offices can be more successful in selling homes to the public. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I specialize in from the ground up, from the market studies to turning the keys over to the manager and saying, here's your new home.
And then
right?
you're done at that point?
Well, ideally I would be done at that point.
He's
but,
never done.
It's never done, right? There's always things, exterior signage that gets delayed, and it's just an ongoing exterior maintenance. It's like, but for the majority of my work, it's 80% of it is done up front before I turn the keys over to the manager.
But then you are looking down the road, say 5 years to the renewal, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's part of the other thing that I do is I gotta keep that on the forefront as like, okay, so in 4.5 years, what's the objective?
Right.
What's the game plan here? Think more strategy. So when it comes time for renewals, I am out there hitting the markets, making sure that we're not paying above market, making sure that we are competitive. So that's kind of the whole ballywag that I do.
Is there also a little bit of weighing the benefits of a given location and, hey, maybe we should be a mile away or in a different retail plaza or anything like that?
Yeah, that kind of depends on like how the market has changed over the time from when we initially either acquired a company and those leases kind of came with it, or we moved into a center or an office building. And so the markets around there is usually if we're the early in, the markets around there may have gotten better. However, if we are, moving in a secondary market, maybe the real estate market has gotten kind of depressed per se, and maybe we want to relocate to the new hip trendy location, pay a little bit more, get a little less square foot. So I do a lot of the internal analytics on that as well. If we have a 10,000 square foot building that we may not be paying but $12 a square foot or something in the lease, but does it make sense to move to a more trendy 3,000 square foot location and kind of go slimmer, sexier, narrower kind of
have
thing?
the hip boutique location.
Yeah, but pay $26 a square foot in the lease. So, that's all kind of the internal juggle, if you will, that we try to kind of design in our real estate portfolios.
Right. I know you had some experiences that you think can be teaching moments, maybe for other people in the industry. So talk a little bit about what you went through and what you experienced.
Yeah, so one, I would say never do business with mobsters, right? That's probably right from the get-go, probably the benchmark. When I was getting into commercial real estate in Baltimore. How I got started was I drove by this industrial piece of real estate leaving my house, and the guy put up for sale by owner sign up outside.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this has got to be a mistake. So I called him, and he was like, the guy's name was Jerry. And I called him, and I said, yeah, you got your property's for sale. How much you want for it? And he said, I want $4 million for it. I was like, well, that's too much for me to buy, but maybe I can list it for you. He was like, yeah, well, come in and talk to me. Okay, fine. So I went in and talked to him, and he agreed to sign a listing with me.
Mm-hmm.
This is my first, like, real commercial transaction, right?
Right.
I was like, okay. So I gave him a residential listing agreement from the residential real estate office, because that's what I had. I didn't know any better, and no one else knew how to assist me, right?
Yeah.
So he signed it, and I listed it. I had it on the market for about 3 months, and then we got a letter of intent in, and it was for $8 million. And I was like, oh, I must have really messed up in the pricing.
Right.
Well, what happened was the letter of intent, it was a 10-acre piece of industrial real estate.
Okay.
And I had priced it at what the guy told me he wanted for it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the buyer came in, and he was buying the land for development to turn it into residential houses.
Mm-hmm.
So we got in the letter of intent for $8 million, and that was because of a competitive bid scenario.
Oh, sure.
And we, because there just wasn't a lot of availability in inner city Baltimore in this location, which was on the fringe of an area that had really recently started coming up. Anyway, so that $8 million letter of intent gets signed, and we negotiated the deal to be taken down in part by the amount of doors that we could develop on that site, and then ended up being $16 million is what the acquisition price would be, because they double stacked the units.
Okay.
So I really had screwed this up, right? So the buyer had $1 million earnest money deposit down. Contract went hard, and if you don't know what that means, I'm sure people in Deal Town do, but when a contract goes hard, it basically means your earnest money deposit on that contract, all the contingencies have been met, and now you're just basically waiting to close. So your earnest money deposit is non-refundable.
Right.
Okay. My client had $1 million mortgage on the land, so I had never done a $16 million deal, and I was like, this is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. And early on in my career, first one out of the park, hit a home run.
Are they all this easy?
Should have known something was up, right?
Yeah.
Should have known something was up. 30 days before closing, the bank looks at this buyer's portfolio and says, you're overextended in South Carolina. We can't lend you any more money for your Baltimore project, and they pulled the funding.
Oh.
This was going into 2008 now, because I'd been doing this deal for about 4 years.
Yeah.
I've been working this deal.
Yep.
Permitting, construction, design, environmental, the whole thing.
Double stacking the units, all this stuff.
Yep.
You got it all worked
4 years into this deal. 30 days before settlement.
4 years.
Lender pulls. Guy has to walk away from the table with leaving his $1 million earnest money deposit.
Man.
Now remember, my client's got $1 million mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Had $1 million mortgage, right? Because he just paid off his mortgage with that earnest money deposit.
No.
Now he's free and clear. The contract's busted, and he goes, I need you to list this for me. I want $18 million for it. I said, no. I'm not doing it. Because he paid me $0 on that $1 million earnest money deposit check that he just got free and clear, because it wasn't in my listing agreement that had something gotten forfeited, that I would receive a compensation from the forfeited money.
4 years in.
4 years in,
Not
got paid
gotten
$0. And the funny thing is that development actually did happen, and it is developed now.
Yeah.
The owner had since died and passed the land on to his son, and his son got the deal done.
Got it.
But I had to walk away from it, and that was a real test of morals, principles, and I was like, this is something that, I couldn't really fault the guy because it wasn't in writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
He could have done done something like, well, it wasn't in writing, but you worked for it for 4 years, so thanks for the $3 million. Here's something. But yeah, he was who he was, and I was like,
do anything for it.
That's the kind of person that you are, then I don't really want to be in business with you. So I didn't continue that.
So a couple things there.
Yeah.
First of all, what should you have put in writing? Like what should that clause have been? And then second, after that, is how do you spot a Jerry? How do you know you're getting into business with a Jerry?
Two great questions. The clause should read that, and again, each company's going to have their own internal way of doing this, but the clause should read something like, in the case of earnest money being forfeited, the broker will receive a percentage, whatever
it is,
of those funds for work completed,
right?
Even though the transaction didn't close. That is standard in all of our contracts now.
Got it.
The listing agreements.
Yep.
That wasn't in the residential one, and no one had thought to put it in because nobody had, I didn't have anybody really showing me the ropes.
But
so
at the
that
time,
cost me a lot of money.
Had you known a CCIM who could have looked over that contract for you, they probably could have told you that, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to the first part is just put a clause in there that says forfeited amount of earnest money, you'll receive X percentage, and then that, as with all aspects of commercial real estate, that percentage is negotiable as well.
Yeah.
And then how do you spot a Jerry? Well, you kind of got to wonder why you would sign a listing agreement with a residential agent that's never done a commercial deal before.
Yeah.
Unless if he was going to take advantage.
Right. Come on, Jerry. Where's your due diligence?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I unfortunately do see this a lot with females in the commercial real estate industry, and it really bothers me. I'll get female residential realtors that call me up, and they're like, I got a client who wants to buy a $10 million apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me do the transaction? Like, okay, well, tell me about the client. Have they ever bought a apartment building before?
Right.
No, this will be their first apartment building. Okay, that's a red flag because most people, when they're buying apartment buildings, they don't start off buying a $10 million apartment building.
Sure.
They start off buying a 4 or 5 unit building, right?
Right.
Something small, a couple $100,000.
Yep.
They work their way to the $10 million. Okay, that's red flag number one.
Yep.
Okay. Have you seen their money? No, but he says that they can get the money.
Okay.
Who's his team? Who's his attorney? Who's his contractor? Who's his financial advisor? Like, give me something to work with.
Yeah.
Oh, but he doesn't have those people in place yet. Okay. I got red flags going up all over the place. And then I was like, is he single?
Oh, man. Oh.
And I have to deal with that a lot where I have to tell, listen, somebody's got $10 million for real to buy apartment buildings isn't going to go to a residential agent to help him find a $10 million apartment building.
He's got people.
He's got people.
Yeah.
If you're doing $10 million deals, you got a system in place. You got people. You got transactional history. You got attorneys. You got financiers. Like, that's just how the world works. And so I do have to, unfortunately, just tell the agents, hey, this is probably not a real lead.
Right. Right. However, I guess you could tie that up into just look for the red flags. And
just look for the red flags.
Seems too good to be true, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of got to question that.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, probably that's some of the oldest advice in the world, right? If it seems too good to be true, it is. But
probably is.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's still accurate. All right.
Exactly.
All right. You said you had a few stories about deals that almost happened but didn't.
Yeah. So just some other things. Probably one of my largest clients is a church here. They're a mega church regionally, and they lease. Their typical footprint is 20 to 25,000 square foot space.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So there's only a couple locations that are going to fit their bill. One being empty big box stores, which then they already have parking and things like that.
I've seen movie theaters also. Movie theaters get repurposed.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like a big 8-plex or whatever.
So, or like industrial sites where, big warehouse, high ceiling. We were opening up a site here in Maryland, and this was actually their fourth site, I believe. And the only deal that we could find that was in that square footage was in an industrial office plex. And we had already done the deal, signed the lease. That's when ceiling height really came into play. That's really kind of what really made me start looking at how a building is designed in all of my locations for all of my clients, because a 14-foot ceiling height is not going to be high enough if you're dealing with a church that has a stage. So that doesn't work if you have a real low ceiling.
Yeah.
And so we were almost really freaking out on how do we get out of this lease? We can't even move in. Had it not been for I think the company's in Italy, they make special speakers for low ceiling buildings, and we had to get those really expensive sound systems to make sure that the sound would work with such low ceilings.
Yeah. That
was probably the first time I was like, oh, this is like building construction really kind of plays into how a tenant is going to occupy the space, right?
So you got to look at the overall use case, how they're going to operate in there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the first one. Probably the second one with the same client was I was doing business with an old friend of mine that I had known since the beginning days of commercial real estate, and we were talking about, I think it was a small daycare or something, and just out of conversation I said, hey, I got a church that's looking for about 20,000 square foot for a fifth location. You got anything in this area? And he said, well, I'm getting ready to buy a shopping center, and they have a 20,000 square foot end cap that's empty. It used to be a cabinet manufacturing company. Would you be interested in, I'll give you a first shot at that one and go take a look at it. So we did. We went up there and we're like, this is great. It's perfect. High ceilings.
I was going to say, does it have more than 14-foot ceilings?
Oh, yeah. Well, they got 25 foot. I made sure this time around, right? I learned from the mistakes. So we get ready to ink that deal. We call our architect and engineer guy, and he took one of the floor plans that we had in another location and kind of overlaid it in this floor plan.
Right.
And was like, well, we got a problem. It's too small. I was like, what are you talking about? It's too small. It's 20,000
square footage is right.
He said, yeah. He said, we can't fit everything we need to in this space. So I was like, oh, this is terrible, because there was nothing in the county that even fit this.
Wow.
In the county, when we met with the county, they were like, hey, we're thinking it would be great if you guys went there. And we're like, yeah, that's the building we're talking about. But so I had to get creative. And on the other side of the building, there was a little grassy knoll area, and there was a more parking. And so I went to Steve, my friend, the owner, and I said, Steve, we're going to need to build about 7,000 to 9,000 square foot more off to the side.
Yep.
And he basically said, okay, that's fine with me, but that's all the construction's on you guys. Don't ask me to do anything with that. And so I had to get creative with that lease, and we basically, he said, I also don't want it to tie up the 20,000 square foot. So you can't wait to build the additional 9,000
Right.
to not take the 20. I can't wait that long. So we structured that lease so that we did the 20,000 square feet now.
So they could go ahead and move in.
And
They could go ahead and get in
the land lease on the other portion. So we're just leasing the land on the other portion while we're building the auditorium space.
Right.
And so I structured it so that at the end of year 5, on the land portion, so I got 5 years basically of just the land lease, which was basically nothing.
Yep.
But at the beginning of year 6, then it would match up to the beginning of year 6 on the 20,000 square foot.
Okay.
So we would have, at the beginning of year 6, we got 29,000 square feet recaptured. So, and that, again, was kind of like, hey, understand how buildings work.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you go and show them and lease them, and make sure your client knows the square footage that they need, because countless times I've seen that where tenants are like, here's what I need.
Right.
Okay. Then you go and find it.
So
it's not what they need.
So that's what I wanted to ask you about. They said they were looking for 20 to 25, right? So
yep.
Were they really like in a 32,000 foot space and they didn't realize it?
No, they just had grown their internal services to the public, and when you start adding in things like Sunday school, childcare,
right,
it becomes more than just a lobby, some office space. You start feeding the hungry and the homeless. You need a commercial kitchen.
Yep.
Well, all that kind of starts cutting into that big box floor plan.
Right.
And you're like, oh, we can't fit it all in there.
Yeah. So would the landlord be concerned at all about ending up with a 32 or whatever thousand square foot space in the end that might be unleasable to another tenant? Is that a concern at all?
I would say the way that it's constructed, we did think about adaptive reuse.
Got it.
Right? Where it's like, okay, what could this space be?
By the way, that alone, if nobody gets anything else out of this episode, adaptive reuse. I didn't know that phrase. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just me. Okay, how do I adapt this building to reuse it in the future?
Totally.
Right. And so we did kind of think that through in the construction and design phase.
Got it.
Like, what can we use this for? And I would probably end up being the leasing agent for him, because he'd be like, hey, find me another tenant.
Right.
But, yeah. So that's just some things that I would say as you're going out there looking at leases and dealing with your clients. Make sure that they fully understand the square footage before you start inking deals, and what the cost of that construction is or that renovation project is. And last thing you want is to be, locked into a lease only to have it come back and bite you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Back to Jerry real quick. So
Sure.
You opened up by saying never get in business with a mobster.
Yeah.
So are we saying Jerry was a mobster, or was that a separate
I'm
thought?
just saying South Baltimore industrial real estate, you know.
All right.
I'm not saying he was or
not
wasn't.
saying
I'm
he was,
saying there's a high probability.
Understood. I didn't know if that was a separate deal that you didn't go into, but okay. I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel you. All right. Awesome, man. I really appreciate you being here on Deal Town.
Sure.
Any final parting words of advice for anybody?
Oh man.
You're like, I gave it all, man.
Yeah.
That's it.
Just keep your head up. Things change, right? Keep on keeping on.
Things change. Keep on keeping on. I like it. All right, man. Thank you.